Why many third world countries will never become first world. For decades, the dominant narrative in economics was one of convergence. The theory was simple: poorer countries, the third world, would grow faster than rich ones, the first world, eventually closing the gap. It has happened before, think of South Korea, Singapore, or Chile, but for the vast majority of the globe, from sub-Saharan Africa to parts of South Asia and Latin America, this convergence has not materialized. More provocatively, a growing body of evidence suggests that for many it never will. The third world is not a stage of development. For some nations, it is a permanent condition. Here is why the ceiling is so hard to break. The global economic system is not designed for parity. The first world specializes in what economists call high-value added goods, software, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and finance. These products have near infinite scalability and high profit margins. The third world, however, remains stuck in the commodity trap. They export oil, copper, coffee, or cheap textiles. The price of raw materials is volatile and subject to a long-term decline relative to manufactured goods, the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. To catch up, a country must industrialize. But today, automation and AI mean that the cheap labor that powered Asia's rise is no longer a viable ladder. Factories need fewer people, and those people need advanced skills that a struggling educational system cannot provide. Every developing nation dreams of building infrastructure, roads, ports, power grids. To do so, they borrow money from first-world institutions like the IMF, World Bank, or private creditors. These loans come with conditions: austerity, privatization, and the opening of markets. The result is a cruel irony. When a country takes a loan to build a dam, the interest payments drain its treasury for decades. When a global crisis hits, like COVID or the 2008 crash, the first world prints money and lowers interest rates. The third world cannot do this. They must default or beg for bailouts. Consequently, many nations spend more on debt servicing than on healthcare or education. You cannot build a first-world nation while sending half your budget to foreign bondholders. The most valuable resource in any economy is human capital. To become first world, you need doctors, engineers, and scientists. But modern communication and transportation make it trivial for those professionals to leave. A young Nigerian doctor can triple their salary by moving to London or Houston. A talented software engineer from Karachi can work remotely for a Silicon Valley firm. This is rational for the individual, but catastrophic for the nation. The home country pays for their birth, their schooling, and often their university education, only to export the finished product for free. This neo-colonialism by migration ensures that the third world is perpetually skimming the bottom of the talent pool, leaving the ambitious and capable to build someone else's future. The first world got rich through a unique historical window: the Industrial Revolution, followed by colonialism, followed by the post-Whale Way boom. They used tariffs, subsidies, and even violence to protect their nascent industries. Britain and the US did not have free trade when they were poor. They had protectionism. Today, the rules are different. The World Trade Organization, WTO, and free trade agreements forbid developing nations from using the same playbook. A country that tries to subsidize its steel industry or protect its auto market is punished with sanctions. The ladder has been pulled up. The global supply chain is already dominated by a few giants: China, Germany, the US. There is simply no room at the top for 50 more industrialized nations. Even if a third world country solves corruption, builds schools, and attracts investment, the planet is now working against it. The first world industrialized by burning fossil fuels, creating the climate crisis. The burden of that crisis falls almost exclusively on the tropics, precisely where most developing nations lie. Rising sea levels destroy coastal cities in Bangladesh and Nigeria. Unprecedented heat waves kill crops in Sudan and Guatemala. Floods wipe out a decade of infrastructure investment in a single monsoon season. These nations are forced to spend their meager budgets on disaster relief and adaptation, seawalls, drought-resistant seeds, rather than on the productive investments that create wealth. Climate change is not a future threat for the third world. It is a tax that consumes 5 to 10% of their GDP annually.
First world nations have strong, predictable institutions, independent judiciaries, functioning tax systems, and property rights that are enforceable. Third world nations often suffer from what economists call extractive institutions, systems designed to funnel wealth to a small elite. Why would a foreign company build a factory in a country where a local general can seize it tomorrow? Why would a citizen invest in a business when the police or taxman will demand a bribe Corruption is not merely a moral failing, it is a structural tax that raises the cost of doing business so high that sustainable growth becomes impossible, and because the elite benefit from this chaos, they actively resist reform. The term developing country implies a trajectory, a movement from point A to point B. But for the majority of the world, the trajectory is flat or backward. The convergence that economists promised was predicated on cheap energy, rising labor demand, and a benign climate. All three of those conditions are gone. This does not mean these countries will collapse. It means they will settle into a new equilibrium. Semi-industrialized, perpetually indebted, exporting raw materials and young people, while fighting climate-induced disasters, they will have middle-class pockets, gated communities and tech hubs in Lagos, Nairobi or Dhaka, surrounded by vast permanent poverty. The first world is not a finish line, it is a closed club, and the doors for most have already been locked.